Delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, which is called 10 Ways to Improve Your Net Promoter Score. It's a topic I think is going to be very fascinating, one that's going to resonate a lot with everyone in the audience. Delighted to be joined today by two people I've both worked with before in the past. Delighted to be joined by David Naylor from Ember Services. David is joining us by telephone. We've had to take special arrangements to attend today's webinar, which is absolutely great. And David's going to be talking through the journey that he's embarked on Net Promoter Scores before in the past. And a regular to you on our webinars is Mike Murphy from Interactive Intelligence. Mike and I first worked together, I think, more than 20 years ago. And Mike's going to be talking through about the ways that technology can help with improving Net Promoter Scores. So we'll then be doing top tips from the audience and interactive questions and answers. I think it's going to be quite fascinating. But before we dive in, what I want to do is just start off with a poll. And I'd just like to find out from the audience how large your Net Promoter Scores are. So if you'd just like to vote on that, the answers are -21 or lower, -20 to 0, 0 to +20, +21 to +49, or +50 or higher. So just like to vote on your Net Promoter Score. If there's a sort of value that doesn't fit within those, well, I think everything should fit in ranges. But if you've got any comments, either leave a comment on the chat room or on the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. So we're just waiting for a few more people to vote on there. I guess we don't have a box we don't actually measure Net Promoter Scores there, but if you're not measuring them, if you'd like to leave a comment on what your plans are for it, would be quite good. So just close the box off there and share the results up on the screen. Well, it looks like we've got people quite already on this journey, David. It's quite encouraging to see that well over half the audience have got Net Promoter Scores already +20. David, I think that's quite an encouraging sign already.
That's good to see, isn't it? Yes, it's better than we had when we started, I think.
Yeah, very good. We've had a comment in from Debaraj, who said their Net Promoter Score varies from -12 to +38. Okay. So I don't know if that's across different different customer groups, or perhaps certainly if you're in outsourcing, it could be different for the different customers. And Lisa said Lisa and Sarah are currently not measuring Net Promoter Scores. Okay, thank you very much for that. Just going to hide that poll, and I'd just like to also look at, if you have been using the Net Promoter Score, just like to explore how long you've been using that, whereabouts you are on the journey. So the answers are more than 5 years, 1 to 5 years, between 3 months and 1 year, less than 3 months, or not using the Net Promoter Scores. My son is actually doing a statistics GCSE this year, and he noticed that actually if you've got the answer 1 year, it could go in one of 2 boxes. So I would have failed on the I should have said up to 3 months to 11 months, I guess. But if you can vote on there, looks like the results are coming through now. So I'll just share those with everyone. And the answers are here. The biggest amount there is between 1 and 5 years, about 50% of the audience. We have a small number, just 3%, who've been doing it for more than 5 years. Got about a quarter of the audience been doing it 3 months to 1 year, and then probably that's the other that we see, 90% not currently using Net Promoter Score. So generally we've got, I would say, a reasonably experienced audience with some people
I agree.
Who are also quite keen to learn more about using Net Promoter Scores. So I think very encouraging. So that's the polls, just hide that one there. Now, delighted to introduce to you David Naylor from Ember Services, and David's going to be taking us through his journey of where he's been with Net Promoter over the course of his long and illustrious career. David, if you'd like to slides up on the screen.
Indeed. Thank you, Jonty. Okay, so the screen should be in place now.
Indeed, we see it clearly.
Good, great stuff. Okay, so there's a lot of people with some experience out there, so hopefully I'll be hoping to give you even more information that you can go on to implement and improve the way you're doing things, and hopefully we'll have a good debate as we get towards the end of the session this afternoon at some of the things which hopefully I can learn from you as well. So hopefully that should be good. Thanks for inviting me here today, Jonty. I just want to take 2 seconds just to give people a very brief background on Ember Services. If you know of Ember, you also may know of Mike Havard, who leads Ember, who's been in the industry as I have for probably, well, actually he's probably been around 20 odd years. Been in the industry about 18, 19 years. He formerly ran a business called CM Insight. As an organisation, we are a customer management consultancy and analytics services business. We work for clients with a strong commercial perspective, which matters to their boards today, and it's built on robust analytics, and hence the analytics team that I lead in the organisation, and a lot of practical experience in all the people who are part of Ember. Just to ensure that what we're delivering is insight and sort of data, and that will help to drive clear actions for organisations based on financial benefits, as well as being great for customers. And the analytics team in particular provides a wide range of managed services, including development of operational and business dashboards, and a managed sort of speech analytics and social analytics service, which means we've invested in the technology and the licenses and the skills around using the tools, the speech analytics tools, so that you don't have to, and you can call upon that service as a service on demand. And so obviously NPS is one of the key metrics that we deal with day in, day out for our clients. And I'm actually drawing this case study together today based on my experience probably over the last 5 years, but in particular the implementation in a telco, which I'll start off by saying is not in the UK, and the journey that we went through with the implementation and the learnings that we got during that process. So if we start by going to the next slide, which is going a little bit slow. There we go. Okay, so why NetPromoter? So there was 3 reasons that this organisation chose to go down the NetPromoter route. The first one was around consistency. So when you looked across the operation, we had service, sales, marketing, all doing their own thing at different times in terms of gathering customer feedback and then using that to decide on next best activity, using that to decide on strategy and direction, and clearly pulling against each other rather than working together. And so because NetPromoter was obviously then starting to become quite well known and understood, people were more attuned and more aligned to the whole approach, and more amenable to sort of working together on that. Secondly, it was around benchmarking, the opportunity to look externally. In particular, in this market at the time we were working, there were a number of new entrants coming in as MVNOs and the new network operators, and they wanted to be able to sort of compare between each other and see what was going on as these new market entrants came in. And I think that's easier said than done in reality. I'll talk about that a little bit in a short while. And the third reason was around engagement. And here I'm talking about engagement of the rest of the business around the customer message and trying to drive customer centricity across the business. So it's fine talking about your own customer satisfaction scores, but they're often seen as a little bit sterile, a bit in isolation, and not really comparable to the rest of the world. As soon as you start talking about the likes of Apple, Southwest Airlines, etc., so major organizations, and talking about their NPS scores, the executives sit up and take note. And that was a real big driver for moving towards NetPromoter in this telco. So For the next few minutes, I just want to take you through the answers to these 5 questions. So these are the ones that we asked during our journey. Which survey question should we ask? Sounds quite straightforward, given that it's Net Promoter, but I think there are some questions that do need looking at in that regard. How and when should we survey? Again, what do we, are we serving at the end of a call, and are we serving at the end of an experience? How do we make sense of the data? Obvious one. How will we take action? It's really an important one as well. And how do we get the whole business involved? So that key question about the engagement and driving action that goes beyond the customer operations. So the first question is obviously the brand question, and an obvious one. It's the main Net Promoter question. Clearly, that's part of what we will ask. We talked a long time about sort of what other questions to ask, and settled on just one more, and that was obviously the question about the interaction with the advisor. And how well did the advisor deal with your issue today? So obviously what we're trying to do here is to separate the one-to-one experience the customers just had with the advisor with the brand. And yeah, it's sometimes quite hard to do that, and I think that everyone will admit that the response to Net Promoter is sometimes tarnished by the interaction with the advisor, and the interaction with the advisor is often tarnished by the brand. So we decided that the way to really sort this out was just to then gather the verbatim. And I think this is probably the most important part of the whole process, is getting the customer to give us some feedback. And while we actually had a question, our experience on trying different questions was that as soon as you gave the customers an opportunity to give some feedback, they would answer, they would tell you what they wanted to tell you, regardless of what question you'd asked. And so you would get in there feedback about the brand or feedback about the interaction, and you could clearly see sort of the where the frustrations were lying. And I think you'll see from my view of the way we've used this data, the verbatim is probably even more important than the actual scores that you get on either of the 2 questions. So secondly, how and when should we survey? This does impact results.
David, we've also had a comment in on about the questions. Alex has said his Net Promoter Score tends to hover around 37 to plus 37 to 43 without too much variation, but they had noticed a big improvement when they changed the survey that had the Net Promoter Score question, which was previously 3 pages down to 3 big questions. And by changing that around, presumably making it much earlier on, there's been a huge improvement in customer uptake.
That's interesting, yes. I guess it also depends on the mechanism that you're surveying. I mean, we weren't doing a large survey, which I guess would be an email type survey, if that's what he was using, I guess. But yeah, I think getting these key questions up front is really important, and we did see differences when we tried different variations of different combinations of questions. The more questions we put in there, the worse the responses would become over time. So it's good observation. And so the mechanism, just on that point, was a very interesting one. So I'm not going to go through all of this. The point here is that there are different mechanisms to get feedback. And we started off with actually an outbound call after the call with the customer had completed, or the interaction had completed. So that could be a day or so after the interaction, and no more than that. And we'd obviously decide which customers we were going to survey based on the last time we spoke to them, and therefore if it was in the last 3 months, or some customers it would be 6 months, we wouldn't survey them again. But they would receive an automated call, and they would leave a voice, just a standard voice response, so saying the score 0 to 10 or whatever, and then they'd read out their verbatim and leave their verbatim, and we then do a conversion of that from speech to text. And we then changed, because being a telco we've got lots of phone numbers, we changed to SMS, and discovered that not only did our verbatim comments improve, but also the score jumped around 20 points. And that was pretty astonishing, and you could perhaps say it was probably not within the spirit of Net Promoter, but it just demonstrated that how you survey, when you survey, has a big difference to people. So I think with an SMS, when you get that message, you have time to think about it and consider your response. And I think people are then sort of more willing and more amiable to a good response than just getting a phone call out of the blue and expecting to think on the spot. So it's not surprising that they didn't go back to using post-call surveys and stuck with the SMS. And so the comments that came in were also usually just as good as the ones that were left on the verbatim sort of spoken comments. Then thirdly,
a question on that from Kelvin, who's asked for any advice on increasing response rates. I think he's referring here to email rates. So we currently get around 6% of customers to serve out for like serve days when we paste the link into each email ticket interaction. How can we get this to the 12% and beyond rate? So certainly if anyone in the audience has got any comments on that, they can either send it in the question box or carry on the discussion on the chat room. David, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so okay, so the second point again, just continue this how and when should we survey, and particularly in the when now, we need to think about the point at which you send out those surveys. And I've already mentioned that if we've already surveyed somebody, we weren't surveying them again, and that was a challenge because we were often surveying people only partway through their interaction with us. And so the big question there was, at what point are we confident that this issue has been resolved, and we should be therefore asking the customer for their feedback at this point. As with all telco organisations, there was quite a lot of repeat calling and sort of a reasonably high non-resolution rate on first call at that time. So that's an obvious one, but then the other ones are around the sales side. So clearly, when we surveyed post-sale, we were getting a good response on a good NPS score, because someone's just bought something they generally wouldn't have bought if they weren't happy with the brand. And so we always got higher sales results than we did service. And then continuing the point about when to survey from a post-sale perspective, when we had technical support interactions, we were then really trying to work out the best point at which to survey those customers. And clearly, when the ticket for technical support was closed, we would then issue the survey. And that would, at that point, because quite a few of those customers were not just mobile, they were broadband customers, we were doing that on email as well. And we would actually send out the request for survey a second time if we didn't get a response the first time. And that did provide a slight uplift in those emails responses. So when you look at the different points of survey, you have to be careful because clearly everybody else who's creating their NetPromoter scores are surveying at different times through different mechanisms, and so you have to be aware that you not only get people who just focus on the number internally and say how come sales are doing better than service, but also externally, you need to watch your benchmarks and make sure that you are comparing apples with apples, even with something that should be as consistent as NetPromoter. The next stage, which we were looking to move to, but when I completed the work with the organisation, we hadn't, was looking at the same customers at different points in their life cycle. I think this is a really important one, and it'd be good to know if anybody's doing this on the call today. So someone's become a customer within 6 months and a year and beyond. How does their perception of the NetPromoter results change? And the question that we were looking at asking was, okay, thank you for your score. Last time you scored as X. Could you give us the reason why it's changed? And so that delta, that change, is probably really quite a useful view of how well the organisation is driving improvements. Or it could be a one-off that causes them to improve to reduce their satisfaction. Also very valuable. So it's a very important metric, I think, which would be good for people to start moving towards. And if you can build up a survey family, people who are keen to continue to be surveyed, and that's easier said than done, of course. looking at making sense of the data. I guess everyone's aware of the scale, the 0 to 10 scale that NetPromoter's built on, and the fact that you have to look below the score. So here are two profiles, one in pink and one in red, which actually on the surface have the same NPS score. But the pink one clearly has much more emphasis on detractors and promoters than the red one. And the red one is much more about sort of the passives sat in the middle at around the 7 and 8 mark. And so the action plan that you then put in place to decide what your strategy is going to be to move detractors to passives to promoters is clearly going to be different. And so at just that point of look below the surface of the data. And this is obviously the highest level. I'll show you some more slides in a moment about sort of how we looked below this and what we then, with that action we then took to change these scores. And the age-old question that we wrestled with is it better to move detractors to passives and take them out of the score, which you do with NetPromoter at that point because it's just the promoters minus the detractors, or do you try and push those passives into being promoters? And I think the key point and the thing that we did was to look at those groups individually, understand them as groups and what was driving people to give those scores, and then work out as a business, well, actually we can do something about that, and we'd take it a step at a time, going into the initiatives that would help us drive the passives to the promoters and the detractors to passives, and hopefully onto promoters. So I don't think there's one particular strategy. It's just about knowing where you can make a difference. And then when you start looking for those things which actually do make a difference, and why the score is as it is, you have to start looking at the operations and looking at the performance of the business. So we were looking at network performance. We were also looking at system outages. And so this graph here just shows two of the key systems that were in use at the time, and the peaks on those red and blue lines just show particular points where we had weeks where there were bad outages of those tools. So customers ringing in would get told, sorry, we can't service your request today because we've got an outage. And so if you look at what happened to the NPS, and just as I say, you can ignore the red line for the moment, but the green line represents at this point in time the NPS for the prepaid customers, and the blue line represented the NPS for on-account customers, contract customers. And yes, there was a long way to go at that point. You can see that actually on that first outage, there was a minor drop in NPS for the on-account, for the prepaid, sorry, but an increase for the on-account customers. And at the next point, again, the same thing. We didn't see that the outages were having a big issue. And up until this point, there'd always been a big focus from the business of driving IT to work harder and to reduce the outages because they felt it was affecting the NPS. Clearly, this showed at this moment in time it wasn't as big a problem as we had been perceived, and so the focus could shift away to areas where we were looking at things which did make a difference. And so I think what we did find, and if you're obviously looking at these graphs, particularly the blue line in the NPS graph, you see a fairly significant variation week to week. And clearly that's fine when you're sort of trying to compare with things like outages where it's very much an instant thing of the outage happens today, happens at one moment in time. But you have to sort of step back from that and look at it at the monthly basis and look at the trend. And we tried not to get too caught up in weekly NPS scores and really trying to focus on the monthly data as the thing which was more important to us. And so, at the monthly level, we're looking at the improvements that we were seeing as gradually we drove new change, new improvements into the business. And we'd look at the monthly level for things like problems which we knew were occurring, and we were looking for the trends. So, for example, we had a shortage of modems at one particular point, and wanted to sort of see how that was affecting the business. And clearly, that wouldn't be seen on a daily basis, but you could see, if you looked month to month, you could see the point at which the modem shortage started, and start to see sort of a major impact on the NPS of that. So whatever you're looking for, you need to think carefully: is it a weekly? Is it a monthly? Where am I going to see my best picture of the data? And of course, the other one, which again is certainly not a weekly impact, is new competitors. And as I mentioned, plenty of new competitors in this marketplace at the time. Comparing month to month was the way to do that. Even with very aggressive marketing campaigns, we see it was still taking time for the effect of those campaigns to come through and affect our NPS and the perception of the brand in the market. One more.
We're getting quite a large number of questions coming through, David. So if anyone's got a question to ask, I would propose if you could put that onto the chat room, then someone else in the audience may be able to answer that for you. That is callcenterhelper.com/chat, callcenterhelper.com/chat. David, we've only got a couple of minutes left on your presentation,
yep,
and then we'll be taking a few more questions.
Okay, so we'll just jump ahead to this next piece. So taking action, the three things that we did to take action: fixing it for the customer, fixing it for other customers, and feedback to advisors. So what did that mean? Fixing for the customer meant that whenever we saw ones and zeros, particularly, certainly initially anyway, we stuck with ones and zeros, we would have those people called back by a manager, often a team leader, often operational managers, and sometimes the directors as well. And whenever we saw a call for action, sort of someone saying call for help, please call me to sort this out, in the verbatums, we would do that. And we managed then the resolution of those through the existing complaints team. Really effective, provided great recovery for customers. But clearly it's got to be a process. It had to be something that was done on a daily basis, and people put the time in to do that. Fixing it for other customers, we implemented a cross-business improvement process, which was bringing in not just the NPS data, but other customer data, and was bringing in resource experts from different parts of the organization, from marketing, sales, from the networking team, all coming together on a 2-weekly basis, because a month is too slow, to sit down and look at the data and work out the action plan. That was critical, and that had senior level buy-in and senior level responsibility to make it happen. We also looked at the categorization of verbatims, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. But particularly it was about how do we use the verbatims was key. Getting those out to the people in the business who could actually action those and see what customers were saying was really critical. Just communicating the score didn't work. We had to see the verbatims. From an advisor perspective, we obviously broke down the scores by using the verbatims to see which scores were controllable by our operation, because the advisor had perhaps done something wrong, or the customer service team hadn't sorted something out, versus a brand one. We still shared all those scores with the advisors, but we only actioned those ones, obviously, which could be obviously actioned by the advisor. So while they understood, that a low score had come back to them, they weren't held accountable for that score at an individual level, but that was done at a team level. So the NPS for the team was put in place, and so across all the teams, the effect of brand perception and branding issues could be ironed out. Getting people involved, I mentioned this whole point about the central team. What we also did was to take the reasons for calling, which are shown on, some of them are shown on the slide here, and correlated those to the NPS, and looked at which ones were the biggest impactors of the NPS score. And so so the first one there, something hasn't happened as promised, clearly a big issue. The first point of ownership for that would be in the customer service operation, and so the customer service director would be responsible for working on the root causes of that. My phone has been barred, which is the second one, was not owned by the customer service team, but by the finance team. and so they were looking at sort of what was driving customers to get upset about being barred. Clearly, sometimes it was the correct thing to do. A lot of the time, it was actually to do with incorrect billing or other issues. So the ownership of each of these call reasons was given back to the customer service, given back to the appropriate team. And finally, just this point about robust analysis. Here you can see this is a particular call reason. I want to add, change, delete my add-ons. And so some stats on the right, which a dedicated team would put together. So this is a shared analytics team sitting across the whole business, providing information back to the people in the business who needed it. So, you know, if I'm in the finance team, if I'm held responsible for fixing NPS, I need to get some data from somewhere to help me to improve that. And so the shared team provided that support. And the graph on the left just shows the categorization of those verbatim comments. And obviously that's the first point of useful data that the business can then start working with to say, well, what is it that's causing people a problem? And in this case, people were ringing up to spend more by adding a service onto their account, and we were actually charging them to do that because they were prepaid customers. And so you know, clearly there was a big push then to remove the charge, which was eventually done. And so my top 5 points, just summarising, I guess what we've seen here. And first thing is the KPI. It has to be across the business, and it's got to be led from the exec level. So in this telco, it was a bonus factor. It was part of the bonus for all the exec, and eventually for all of the operational parts of the business as well. So yeah, everyone had a stake in the NPS score, and making it sort of the thing that they focused on. But deliberate about when you survey. So, you know, as I mentioned, think about the results you're getting, because the context in which you get those results will be important. You know, so sales versus post-service, post-service support calls will have different scores. So you need to know that you're comparing the right things and surveying at the right points. This resource team, I think I can't emphasize enough the importance of having people who can analyze the data and deliver that information back to the business to help them work on the improvements. It's something which most businesses neglect or try to give to teams who are already busy on other projects, and it needs to be a day-to-day business as usual team that focus on this. Communicating the verbatims, not just the scores. I mentioned that one. Really important. Share those verbatims to bring it to life. And the key one, driving fast action. So if you get a 0 or 1 score today, call that customer back. You have to do it straight away. And then the improvement cycle needs to be relevant. So if you need things that are highly operational that need to be fixed, there's no point feeding it into a long monthly process that eventually will get to a point where something gets fixed. It's got to happen quicker. So think about that closing the loop process of driving those improvements and work as fast as you can to take an action. So that's all from me. But if you want more information, you can see my details there. You can contact me at Ember Services. Obviously over to you, Jonty, to take a poll, I believe.
Okay, well, I'm just going to put in a couple of questions before we go to a poll. We've had lots of questions and comments from the audience, but I think 2 were particularly relevant. And there's been a number that have come up along a similar line. George has asked whether engaging the business there's merit in tying a proportion of remuneration to Net Promoter Scores. And I know, David, that's something you'd covered in your presentation, that everyone, including the execs, was on there. Alex was rather worried on this. He said it was sort of, if you offer about the behaviour of agents being, well, if we give you a special money off, will you score me 10 on the survey? How do you feel the behaviour of bonuses impacts employees?
I think yes, you have to be very careful. and I would always advocate sort of taking it away from the employee's responsibility to get involved with the survey. Soon as you start mentioning that or allow them to mention that, then you're biasing the survey clearly. The quality team can support to a degree, I guess, because you can review calls and make sure that advisors are not biasing surveys. If they are, you can often see that in the results you get anyway. So they still stand out quite clearly often as someone who's always getting very good scores. That makes them, for me, a target for the quality team to go and check. Well, actually, are they influencing inappropriately?
I've also had a couple of questions about response rates that come in. So Kelvin's talked about things to improve response rates, and one respondent had certainly said, what they did is they actually got their emails up by just sending out a link with just the survey on it, not lots of other things on it. So that was one way they did to drive response rates. And Stephen's asked the question, Mike, I don't know if you've got a view on this one. Does a low response rate combined with a high Net Promoter Score mean a problem?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a problem. I think what might be helpful, if you will, is to think about educating your customer on the Net Promoter Score, ambitions that you have, and kind of put some information, if you will, ahead of a survey, so the customer can actually get a gist of Net Promoter, the measure, the sort of different scores, what they mean. And that's something that we actively use here, and we're seeing pretty good, if you like, response rates. I mean, we're getting over 30%. Yeah, we're quite pleased really with the success we've had. But we're kind of, we're sort of deliberately trying to educate the customer before we actually put a survey to them.
Yeah.
And then we're finding we're getting good response rates.
Yeah, and I guess if you're measuring verbatims, if you've got a very high response rate, you're probably not going to be able to measure those verbatims. David, is that a danger you found?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way they would look at that is using tools to support that. If you mean sort of actually being able to get through those verbatims and understand them, you can use text and speech analytics tools to assist that. But yeah, there's always a danger of so much information making sense of it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump across to a poll now. And what we want to do is just explore what people in the audience have done to improve their Net Promoter Scores. So if you'd just like to vote on all the things that you've done to improve your Net Promoter Score, if you haven't got an answer that's on here, if you'd just like to pop that into the question box, leave a comment on the chat room, would be good. So the options are removed average handling time as a target, empowered your employees, multi-skilled your agents, deployed new technology, or improved back office processes. So just like to vote on all of those that are appropriate. So you can vote for potentially all 5 if you've tried all 5 on there. So just be interested to share the results. Mike, back-end processes, popular or not, do you think?
Kind of say, why about investing in resources? I mean, if it's important to get your Net Promoter Score improved, maybe there's a signal there that says perhaps you're not delivering a great customer experience. So yeah, perhaps you should be investing in resources to
putting more
deliver. More field people, contact other people. So in that sense, I always find that it's not always a case of removing and reducing. It's actually no, stop. We've got to start investing again to achieve the results that we want to achieve.
Okay, well, let's see what the audience is doing and share the results with everyone. Actually, improve back office process, which I think is where most organizations are broken. 65%, so certainly that's a big area to look at. 59% of empowering the agents, and there's a very good article on Call Center Helper called It's Not Empowerment Unless You Trust Your Staff. Multi-skilled, and actually only 30% of deployed new technology. So just like to do a small drill down on there and ask the question of the audience, what is your biggest challenge you have to improving your Net Promoter Score? So if you'd just like to tap that into the question box, would be interesting. So if you'd like to put that into the question box now, what is your biggest challenge to improving your Net Promoter Score? So while those are coming through, I'll come back to those in a short while. And so we're getting a few things: product quality, products, doing things right first time, telephony advisor behavior coming through, brand reputation, engaging the rest of the business, some of the answers coming through,
yep.
Getting advisors to empathize with customers, the reputation of the energy industry is holding back our NetPromoter Score, I guess they're an energy company, brand perception, and financial market fluctuation as a financial service company. I guess if you're selling stocks and shares, if the price is up, everyone's happy. If it's gone down, then people are not so happy. So we'll come back to those in a short while. Delighted to introduce to you Mike Murphy from Interactive Intelligence, who's going to be taking us through some ways that technology can improve your Net Promoter Score. So if you'd like to get your presentation up on the screen, some of the other things coming back. IT restraints is one of the challenges coming back from one of our other members of the audience. Mike, across to you.
Great, thanks, Jonty, and thanks, David. Really useful input coming from you there, so appreciate that. That was very helpful. So, hi everybody. I've been active, if you like, in the contact center space in the UK since 1990. Seen quite a lot of change, if you like, in that time. With regards to technology and Net Promoter Score, which I want to cover off today, really, just like I mentioned when we were talking earlier, we've kind of deployed a Net Promoter strategy within Intelligence, and we're sort of deliberately surveying all of our sort of 5,500 customers globally on the basis of what we call a relationship Net Promoter Score strategy. So it's an annual survey that we're taking of those customers, and you know, today we use like a third party, sort of like email a link to a customer, ask them to make their score, and that's kind of working quite well for us because it's kind of like our second year of this sort of like strategy. But we're actually coding our own capability now, so hopefully in a future webinar, Jonty, we can tell our audience about the good things about that.
Yeah,
that's for another day. So today, really, with regards to the point that David mentioned, the life cycle of the customer is very important, and the Net Promoter Score touch, if you will, is only one touch among what typically will be many. So therefore, when you have to do, if you like, tactical touches to the customer for surveys, maybe a transactional survey or a tactical survey, we've got to make sure that that doesn't interfere with the sort of the value you want to get from a strategic Net Promoter Score. So, you know, we have some tools like the basically process automation tools, but they give you control to allow you to decide, you know, when the customer gets surveyed. You know, maybe clean the data that you have in your CRM systems to make sure we're surveying the right people, and then just to avoid this sort of notion that David touched on, which is kind of like burning out your customer with sort of too many surveys before it comes along to the one you really want, like the Net Promoter one, or in the States they like to call it survey fatigue. But from that perspective, it kind of manages the sort of rate at which you survey people in an automated way, and that's kind of much more effective, we find.
And I guess depending on when you hit people on that journey, their Net Promoter Score will be slightly different at different points in the life cycle.
Yeah, as you join as a customer, as you become a customer in flight, and perhaps as you're leaving, you know, your sort of your state of opinion, if you will, of the vendor will change. But I'm sure we're all sort of familiar with these sort of popular tools that have been out there to try and help execute these kind of strategies. Post-call and sort of on-demand IVR survey tools are pretty prevalent. I like the second one there. You can see in the sort of like the image. It's basically an agentless one where you kind of email the customer with a unique code and a free phone number. The customer enters the code, registers the score. We then know who the customer was and the specific score, which is quite a nice, tidy, simple sort of way to capture the information. So like on the back of an email, an easy way just to grab it through a free phone number. But we also have, you know, with the post-call sort of IVR tools, if you will, there's been good experiences with those. There's also been some bad experiences with those. And in a way, if you like, David validated that earlier by showing you the take-up and how customers feel. So, you know, SMS is very effective, but the post-call IVR ones, if you like, weren't so effective. But what I would say is I kind of view that really as like junk in, junk out. You know, that's my opinion. So I would sort of ask you to think about investing in how you conduct these surveys, and you know, ultimately it's about getting actionable information. You know, something I can actually use to change and improve my business. And you know, whatever tools you are using, they've got to be easy to use. You've got to be able to control it. You've got to be able to have good reports on it and make sure whatever you're doing doesn't irritate your customer. So from that perspective, when deployed successfully, we're seeing excellent results with these kind of tools. And with good sort of like tactical information, that's always going to make sure that your Net Promoter Score, when it comes along, is going to be equally a successful improvement. But it's all about really sharing the information. So given that the customer has gone to the bother of completing a survey for you, in a way you're kind of duty bound now to do something with that information. So getting that sort of customer score into their record within your CRM system, that's immediately going to give you a context to their score, because in that sort of location of information, you know exactly the customer's experience today, but then you can sort of compare that to the score they've given you. And as such, your sort of priority list of next actions, if you will, starts to be revealed. So if you can find, for example, a pocket of poor performing agents or a poor performing part of the business, then maybe through quality management you can start to deliberately improve that behavior and sort of like bring them up to the standard the customers are expecting in order to drive that sort of better score in the future. And maybe you want to validate that effort by having run a quality sort of improvement strategy, just verified through some post-call surveys tactically to make sure that yes, these guys are actually now on board and up to par, shall we say. But continuous improvement is beyond that really, and we use our software, for example, our process automation software, to gather the results from our customers and then categorize them into, if you like, department owners. So the guys who head up customer service, the guys who head up professional services, they all, if you like, get a automated report from our system which kind of says, look guys, for this region, these are the kind of scores we're getting for your function, and these are the comments that are coming through from our customers. Now, our customers have given the score, we want to provide some feedback, so tell me what the feedback is going to be. What are you going to do as a department leader to actually fix this and improve the score for our customers? And with that feedback then, we actually take it deliberately and deliver some feedback back to our customer. So that sort of provides that sort of continuous loop. And believe me, when you go through the effort of actually doing that, what you find is you massively increase your loyalty from your customer, because you have listened to the survey, you've done something about it, and you've actually come back and confirmed that with the customer. So in a way, the idea of like, what to do with all the data and kind of doing something quickly, remember we can sort of automate a lot of that with process automation, and that allows you to kind of run a very sort of lean and efficient operation. It's not a very sort of body intense to actually do these kind of strategies. But it's not all about cold, so don't forget social media. And just take a quick reading, if you like, of how you're doing. You could simply put maybe a sort of a survey on your website or on a blog that you might have up there. You could be running a poll on Facebook, or getting a poll from your Twitter followers. Even like often we put YouTube videos up about our capabilities, and we kind of gather feedback and comments from there. But as a sort of simple, quick, and easy way to sort of get a temperature read from your customers, this is quite effective, certainly for, are we sort of ready now to kind of launch a Net Promoter on these people, or are we going to get some feedback, or is there something we can be doing to improve it? And then finally, really, this is something I've come across with a customer which I thought was quite interesting, quite refreshing, really, and it's about measuring customer compliments. And initially, the customer had run this into their field operations team, where there's guys actually out doing some work in their customers' homes, and at the end of the job, the customer is invited to sort of sign off the work by the guy in the home. Now, in a sort of comments field at the end of that form, basically when they capture a compliment from a customer, they count that, and then that sort of count, if you will, gets compared across the nation, and sort of field service teams have been compared all across the country. Now that really drove a great sort of surge of improvement throughout the sort of services department, shall we say, of this organization, which was very effective. They were delighted. And what they were sort of scratching their heads about was, well, how can we extend this wider throughout the business? And we were able to deploy the speech analytics capability of our software. So through listening to what the customers are saying and what the agents are saying, we're able to also count compliments within the contact center. And they just loved that, because all of a sudden their field sort of teams, if you will, which are quite substantial, and across all their sort of different contact centers that they had as well, suddenly they were being measured with a common measure, which was compliment. So for them, if you will, it's like a tactical assessment of, are we improving? Well, through that sort of strategy, they could say, yes, we are. And a nice little win was, it was a very a nice way to give them some sense of teamwork. Before it was a silo of I'm in the field, you're in the contact center, we don't talk to each other. Suddenly they were all sort of measured the same, so they felt much more connected, shall we say.
Yeah, and I think we're all too quick to be rather negative, and I think being positive is certainly very interesting. I think one that can work very well, and also helps to permeate change through the rest of the organisation. If you're being positive rather than this is broken, this is broken.
Absolutely.
If you get particularly verbatim feedback, oh, it's really great apart from this,
yeah,
then people are more likely to go and fix it apart from.
Great point. So that was quite a refreshing one to share, and perhaps that's useful. But just to summarise, really, we kind of talked about process automation, we talked about post-call IVR surveys, we talked about CRM integration, and some speech analytics as well. So they're the kind of things that kind of jump out, if you will, when you think about a topic like this. And certainly from our own experience, we're using this, and we're getting some great results. So with that, Jonty, I'm going to hand back to you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mike. Some great ideas there, and I certainly think the positive is a very, very good one, and certainly using speech analytics to drill down on that is another great way of getting verbatims, which I think is one of the keys we've talked about today. Okay, right, it's now your turn in the audience for your top tips. Chance to win a bottle of champagne if you want to send your tips through, and we will collect all the best tips and publish them in an article on Call Center Help in the next couple of weeks. So here's the first tip. Team leaders to go through negative feedback for advisor NPS on a daily basis, as well as genuine praise for positive feedback. Competitions rewarding excellent NPS feedback. So Mike, very much positivity there.
That's terrific. Good. But so it kind of validates that thinking that we kind of came across before. So from that perspective, I like that very much.
Okay. Gerda says, explain why. I don't know if why is an acronym. Empower employees, customer delight as the master KPI of the organization. I guess customer delight is a little bit linked to NetPromoter Score. But quite importantly, translate the why into how, which will flow across in actions across the work floor. And David, I find this one very interesting. Can you continuously find different methods of capturing customer feedback and sentiment? And I guess sentiment may be the key word here. Always asking how we can improve further, acting on this feedback, making changes and communicating these changes back to the customer.
That's always a challenging one, isn't it? Sort of we often just take too long to fix things, and businesses are scared of making commitments to sort of go back to customers. And I think that's one of the things we did certainly with the ones and zeros when we called them back. We followed it through to say, look, it's now being fixed and it won't happen again. And it was always seen as really positive.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on time. If you say, yes, that problem you had with us 2.5 years ago, well, we finally changed our computer system to avoid that.
Exactly, yeah.
I think there's an observation I would make, if you will, is like an element of courage really here, because this is customer feedback. So in a way, if you're getting the right sponsorship behind a NetPromoter Score strategy, which must be CEO level, then really there should be no reason why you can't sort of like this is the feedback. Hey guys, it might be ugly, but the point is we've got to have the courage to deal with it, and on that basis, take action, wherever that is, your resources or change systems, or I feel that can be sort of people are sort of, if you like, the two sort of stuck in the day-to-day, shall we say?
Yeah.
And when you go to like this kind of strategy and you get the actual feedback from the customers, this kind of goes above typical process.
Yeah.
To me, it's like make the change, or competitors will do it for you.
Yeah. Very powerful one, I guess a number of people are doing. Give your people access to self-serve the verbatim comments, particularly if you serve those back to the advisor that handled the call in the first place.
Yeah.
Quite interesting. Andrew says, don't forget about the promoters. Identify promoters at risk and address the issues. There's always a lot of focus on the detractors. If we lose a promoter from one end of the calculation and add a detractor on the other end, we're doubling the negative impact. And I guess, David, passives are a big thing, because passives often get completely ignored.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why you look at the verbatims in isolation and say what makes a passive and what makes a promoter. I think the challenge is when you ask the question with promoters, if you say, what could we have done to improve it, it's like, well, nothing particularly. But if the question is, what is it that makes you give us that score, perhaps you might get a different answer and say, well, it's these things that you do really well that make me a promoter. So that's how do you get that level of detail, because that's the important stuff.
Chris has said, top tip, switch to SMS. So certainly was on your chart there. Certainly, if it's a simple question, quite good. If it's more complex, can be more challenging. Introduce agents to the work with the surprise and delight ethos. Understand their inquiries and delight them with a surprise at the end of their queries. So interesting. I wonder what surprise that would be.
Well, fixing it straight away would be surprising, and
yeah,
I think so. I mean, if you were able to do that, if you're like while the customer's on with you, then that's pretty cool.
Enable agents to understand why they're getting the stores they are making them a customer. I guess one of the demotivating ones is if there are things that are outside the agent's capability, and you tie that back to the agent, particularly in terms of bonus.
Yeah.
External
things,
then that can be difficult to deal with. Yeah. Sven has said, my best tip to improve Net Promoter Scores is listen to the calls leading to the scores and translate them from what the customer says to what he probably means, and then give that feedback to the agent. What else have we got? Quality assure the staff who have the customer interaction. We want to ensure consistently high standards and therefore consistently higher scores. Lindsay says we don't currently measure Net Promoter Scores, but to improve the response rate of a recent email survey, offered a competition prize, and this didn't put off people from honest, negative, or constructive feedback. So certainly, prizes can incentivize take up. I guess also acting on, or people feeling that, because there is a danger of people fill in surveys almost realizing that no one's going to read them, but just feeling that it gets it off their chest. I'll take a couple more. Actively asking promoters to promote you with testimonials on your website and feature best business on your internet as a partner of your business. That's quite a nice way of doing it. There's one site, Getting Personal, which is does personalised gifts. They have a book of smiles for all their positive bits of feedback, which I thought was very nice. Published on their website, thousands of them.
It's not a book of jokes, is it?
No. Sorry?
It's not a book of jokes.
And we'll take another tip. Engage as much as possible. The more engaged the customer felt, the higher the Net Promoter Score. So some great feedback on there.